how much am I a conservative and how much I'm not. I would have liked to address that question. I think on DRS, I suppose what I am being is not conservative, but there are other things I am more conservative about. But I would like to talk about corruption, the balance between domestic and international cricket, between T20, which of course is excitingly coming up on your doorstep in the next few weeks, I'd like to talk about day-night Test cricket and the context for Test cricket. And I'm perplexed that after the huge success of the first day-night Test match in Adelaide, which I saw, the issue seems to have gone off the agenda. Do you know that at that match over 3 days, 127,000 people came to watch, whereas in a normal Test match between Australia and New Zealand in Adelaide, they probably have got about 35 or 40,000 over the same period. And it was a wonderful spectacle, and it was a very good match, and there seems to be no reason not to extend it. It's not, I don't think it will work everywhere, but it will work in a lot of places. But I'm also keen in this talk to shift gear and speak more generally about features of cricket in all its forms. Before doing so, I'll say one more thing, that from my distant viewpoint, how much I admire Shashank Manohar. I admire his openness. He doesn't want bullying at the ICC. He doesn't micromanage the ICC. He suggested that the contribution costs arrangement that is benefiting India, England and Australia is arbitrary and unfair. He's argued against the constitutional right of England, Australia and India to head up the ICC and its main committees. He acknowledges the issue that a members' club, the ICC, means that people have to wear different hats in order to back cricket as a whole before their own self-interest. By self-interest, I mean their own country interest. He acknowledges these conflicts of interest. This is, after all, what we ask and expect of team players in sport on the field. It's a sort of cliche in that regard to say there's no I in team. Well, there should be no I in the teams that make up the governors of cricket and the administrators of cricket any more than there should be in the teams that play on the field. But as I say, I want to talk about sport in general, cricket, focusing particularly on the topic of being on form, or what is sometimes more currently called being in the zone. Here on the zone is the novelist Don DeLillo, and I'm quoting. He says, "There's a zone I aspire to as a novelist. Finding it is another question. It's a state of automatic writing, and it represents the paradox that's at the centre of the writer's consciousness. I think is at the centre of the sportsman's consciousness as well. First, you look for discipline and control. You want to exercise your will, bend the language your way, control the flow of impulses, images, words, faces, ideas. But there's a higher place, a secret aspiration. You want to let go. You want to lose yourself in language, become a carrier or a messenger. The best moments involve a loss of control. It's a kind of rapture, and it can happen with words and phrases fairly often, he says, completely surprising combinations that make a higher kind of sense, that come to you out of nowhere, but rarely for extended periods, for paragraphs and pages. In his novel End Zone, he says, a number of characters play a game of touch football in a snowstorm. There's nothing rapturous or magical about the writing. The writing is simple. But I wrote the passage, maybe 5 or 6 pages, in a state of pure momentum, without the slightest pause or deliberation." It's the end of the quote. A higher place, a secret aspiration, a letting go, a rapture. This is being in the zone. And occasionally, at every level that one plays a game at or does other things at, I think one reaches moments or senses of that. The sense of stillness and alertness may be enhanced by having outfaced danger. There's a British climber called Andy Kirkpatrick, and he's reflecting on his ascent of reticent wall on Yosemite's El Capitan, solo ascent. He said, "You confront how mortal you are. If you can push through that, you get to this amazing, tranquil place. Time seems to slow down or stand still. In our absorption in the moment, we feel freed from everything insignificant and petty, from the shackles and complexities of our personality and of flustered everyday life, even perhaps from extraneous thinking." And pioneer aviator Charles Lindbergh said, "These minute details in my cockpit, the grandeur of the world outside, the nearness of death, the longness of life." So the zone is a more seductive place to aspire to than simply being on form. It's a bit like being in love with someone as opposed to being good friends. The zone is a state of being raised above the prosaic or the everyday. It's magical, where there's no sense of strain. One might be tempted to use a word like inspired or blessed for such exceptional states of mind. We long for it. We remember moments of being there. Now, I think style comes into it, a free-flowing elegance, which expresses an inner state of being that is itself free, flowing, and graceful. Think of Gary Sobers, a man whose every move on a cricket field spoke of ease and spontaneity. His play expressed delight and freedom and evoked it in the spectator. Even his walk was languid. We're less inclined to attribute being in the zone to a workaday player whose effort shows all the time, despite his good form. When in the zone, we feel the world cooperates with us, is in harmony with us, and we with it. Collectively, a whole team feels itself as one, we say. Even the opposition seem to exist as opportunities for us to express our true skill. Australian batsman Ian Chappell, Greg's brother of course, when asked what spinners were for, once said, "To get you from 60 to 100 as quickly as possible." By contrast, being merely on form may involve more struggle and willpower. There's something of the contrast between play and work here, and of course we need both. There's another stream of meaning in zone, less to do with grace, more to do with tranquility. A batsman is unruffled by aggression or sniping by the opposition or the crowd, or indeed by a total lack of crowd or atmosphere, as in recent test matches in, let's say, the UAE, played in almost empty stadiums. Of modern English batsman Alistair Cook most conveys this sense of assuredness. He seems to be effectively oblivious of the environment. And at Johannesburg in 1995, Michael Atherton batted for 10 hours and 43 minutes, scoring 185 not out, to save the second test against South Africa. According to Shield Berry, the journalist who interviewed him when he came off the field at the end of his marathon innings, Atherton was quiet, not visibly tired at all, far from drained, just serenely calm. He looked as though he could have gone back out to the middle, taken guard again, and batted until the animals in the safari park came home. Atherton himself observed that losing a partner wasn't really, in that innings, a cause for disappointment. He'd been too far above the battle to notice, too inwardly certain of success to think for one moment of failure. It was a trance-like state, never to be recaptured. Fear of failure would, Shield Berry suggested, have interrupted the blessed state. I would add, so might recklessness or complacency. Atherton had neither. He achieved that perfect balance of concentration and relaxation in which both failure and hubris are equally out of the question. Small children have this state of mind when absorbed in an activity like drawing. I like the story told by educationist Kenneth Robinson of a 6-year-old who was drawing a picture, she said, of God. But, said an adult, no one knows what God looks like. Quick as a flash, the child replied, they will soon. Fear of mistakes or ridicule drums that kind of creativity and freedom out of children and out of adults, Robinson says, and I agree. Experiences of being in the zone can also, unlike being in form, be momentary. I remember taking a catch in a county match for Middlesex against Essex at Southend. I think it was in 1980. I was fielding at slip, and somebody went for a hook, and the ball ballooned up over the wicketkeeper's head and towards the sight screen, running back at full tilt to get to where the ball would drop for the difficult chance. I was aware of being utterly confident that I would take it. In the event, I dived full length and caught the ball inches from the ground. I was completely, even aggressively, perhaps even arrogantly confident that I would get it exactly right. Just briefly, I had that exalted sense of acting with total conviction in exactly the right way, of everything being in place. Such conviction may, of course, be illusory, belief faltering in the face of a recalcitrant world and a flawed self. In a similar state of eager anticipation, a friend of mine, when I told him this story, recalled an experience that started like mine, but ended up in accident and emergency, with a squashed middle finger still misshapen 40 years on. Ronnie O'Sullivan, some of you may know about, snooker's erratic genius. In an interview piece in the New Yorker, the writer, Sam Knight, says that O'Sullivan spends a lot of time thinking about the white ball, which of course you hit when you're playing snooker. He's come to believe that the quality of initial contact between his cue tip and the sphere, the white sphere, the momentary grip, the transfer of energy and intent is what decides everything. If the white responds, he will not lose. You're using your hands, you're creating, you're making that white ball dance, he says. When the connection isn't there, O'Sullivan feels it right away. It's invisible, he says, but it's night and day to me. I know I'm playing a different game from what they're playing. It's hard to know exactly what he means by this night and day difference. What strikes me about it is the intimacy of the connection between intent, mental intention, and act in the physical world, between mind state and material state, between the self and the world, between mind and matter. At those moments, it feels as though it's transcended. The duality or gap is transcended. And I want to say one thing about psychoanalysis at this point, which is what I've been doing mostly for the last 35 years. Psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott asks himself what allows the child to feel fully in the world, what gives him, and later the adult he becomes, the secure sense that his spontaneous gestures have traction on the world. His answer is that the infant is given by his carers a necessary illusion that his desires move the world, do in fact move the world. He wants milk, and lo and behold, his sensitive mother provides milk on offer. He feels lonely, he wants to be held, and his mother or his carer hug him, intuiting his need. Gradually, of course, the growing child has to learn that he's not omnipotent. But for this older child and the later adult he becomes, to be at home in the world, to be not alienated or cut off, this initial sense of connectedness is vital. The schizoid person, the cut-off person, by contrast, feels as though there's a barrier, sometimes represented in his thoughts or his dreams by a sheet of glass, between him and the world. I think Ronnie O'Sullivan, discovers in his play a heightened experience of this intimate belonging, with his transfer of energy and intent, his making the white ball dance, the connection being there, by his being in the zone. As a cricket captain, there were also occasionally passages of play when everything came together, the world falling in with one's thinking. Clive Rice, the South African and Nottinghamshire all-rounder who died recently after a long struggle with a brain tumour, was an accomplished, forceful batsman who liked to stand tall and hit the ball off the back foot through the covers. In the first innings of a county match between them and Middlesex, us, he'd played himself in and he was beginning to look to be more aggressive. I sensed that there was a chance of the ball bouncing higher from our promising young fast bowler, Norman Cowans, who later played for England as well. That might bounce a bit higher than Rice would anticipate, in which case, and here I felt my way into his stance and his body, I shaped my way into the shape of it, the stroke I imagined him playing, and I imagined that there might be a thick outside edge, and I pictured the ball flying to a wide, deep slip. And on a hunch, I put Clive Bradley, who's one of our best fielders, not in the gully or third slip, but at this unorthodox position about 30 yards back from the bat. Shortly afterwards, lo and behold, the ball went straight to him at a nice catching height, and we got Rice out. And something similar happened in the second innings too, this time on the leg side, where he was looking to flick the ball like this, and I put in a deepish short leg, and he was caught there too. He thought there was something magical about this captaincy. In fact, it was a mixture of sensory or bodily intuition laced with luck. Many years later, I saw a film. It's called The Great Dance, A Hunter's Story, made in 2002. And it was made in the Kalahari Game Reserve in Africa. The hunters are bushmen, pursuing on foot animals that can run much faster than human beings. As they followed the tracks of deer in the dry, stony ground, the hunters become the deer, using their bodily identification to find faint footprints in the ground. There's only a little sand, there's lots of stone, and the hunters would go like this, like a deer. They would become a deer, and then they'd pick up the trail a few yards further on. They literally shape themselves into the deer's way of moving, taking a few flickering, deer-like steps, and therefore able to pick up its trail again. Also running after the deer. After 3 hours of this man Karuha's running hunt in the hottest part of the day, the film's voiceover says, he no longer follows the tracks, he runs where they will run. He twists back where they will twist back. He runs among the thorns to chase them out of the shade. He does not slow down. He thinks of his family who must eat meat. Karua himself says afterwards, when I was running, I was really a kudu, a deer. It's a long time since I felt like this. You know how hard kudu is working when you feel it in your body. You have taken kudu into your mind. As it tires, you become strong. Sorry. You've taken its strength into your body. After more than 4 hours, the kudu is at last exhausted, and Karuha is able to get close enough to kill the animal with his spears. The method is an example of the tortoise and the hare. It's also an example of entering the mindset and the body set of one's prey in ways that lead to success. You must know the ways of the animal, he says, to hunt it. On another hunt portrayed in the film, the cheetah helps them find the prey it has killed. And he says, we put on the cheetah's mind. If we follow him, he will lead us to his kill. We search for the story. We read the animals' stories. You learn the ways of the birds that come on the wind to you. They whisper to you, rain is coming. As a cricket captain, one may at times become, rare times, a bushman to one's opponents. We may do the same also for our teammates, entering their mindsets with a different purpose, to gain their support rather than to defeat them. Karuha says, my father's tracks have long since been washed away. He taught me. Even now when I'm hunting, I'm singing his song. I'm dancing his dance. Tracking is like dancing. This is the great dance. Dance is talking to God. Our God, Bihi Sabulu, put us here. He brings us the